Welcome back. You're still watching us here on The Breakfast Show, and now we are resuming our discussion regarding Egypt's fight against terrorism. Egypt's airstrike against Daesh hideouts in Libya after the Daesh terrorist group slaughtered 21 Egyptians there. Now, there are various reactions to these developments, and the foreign minister is expected to attend the special session at the United Nations Security Council today, along with his Libyan counterpart, Mohammed al-Diri. We are also expecting confirmation from the armed forces regarding ongoing military operations and airstrikes against Daesh hideouts and positions in Libya. So many developments, and still we are continuing our discussion. Therefore, we are very much delighted to have with us Mr. Wael Nawara, political analyst. Good day to you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Wael. As Hala said, that there are various reactions towards these heinous crimes. So can you shed more light on the international reactions regarding what happened in Libya?
First, we have to realize that there is an element of guilt on the part of the international community, because they started something and was not finished.
Yes.
You remember that NATO bombed the former head of the regime, Gaddafi, for several months and armed many of these militias with heavy arms, and unfortunately the job was not completed, and these arms were used in having this chaos in Libya right now, having a kind of extremist militant organization which announced its allegiance to Daesh. So I think most of what I heard, most of the reactions, for example, the British Prime Minister, the French, they were all supportive. The United States said that it was not consulted, and
there is no coordination between
there was
Egypt,
no coordination, and I think this is the best way, because the Egyptian army and Egypt coordinated with the Libyan legitimate government and the Libyan
this is what
army.
matters, yes.
Exactly, this is what matters, and it shows Egypt's commitment to respecting other states and sovereignty, and coordinating with the local administration.
But if we're talking about the reactions, sir, still there are so many people who thought that their reactions are not enough, they are not strong enough, because after the Charlie Hebdo attack in Paris, so many people started tweeting "Je suis Charlie," and there was an international outcry and a march against terrorism, denouncing terrorism, and so on and so forth. So people are wondering, why hasn't this happened as a reaction to Egypt? Those were 21 innocent civilians, innocent Egyptians. They are not, they were not involved in any kind of actions. So how do you see this? How do you see this opinion?
There were strong reactions. For example, the Pope said he was weeping for what happened, the Pope in Rome of the Vatican. We saw very strong condemnations from Britain, from France, from Europe, from other parts of the world. But remember that ISIS or Daesh, they had previously shown similar atrocities. So I think the world has come to kind of accept that the kind of
but
savage...
This is really dangerous. What you're saying here is that the world is accepting now these terrorist acts.
Not accepting.
Not accepting, but getting used to it as usual things or daily actions.
Yes, getting used to it from Daesh. We have seen similar scenes in Iraq. We have seen similar scenes in Syria months now, and many Western hostages were slaughtered before the cameras. We've seen also.
But not 21.
Exactly. This is in fact
in one incident.
Yes. In fact, this is in a way unprecedented.
Yes.
But remember also what happened in Paris was inside French territory. It's like what happened in 9/11. So it's inside French territory. Is not many Westerners, of course, and everybody usually. They get alarmed when they feel that the danger is coming to their own territory, their own neighborhood. So I think there is, of course, a kind of a hypocrisy in a way, as you describe it in the reactions. But I think also we have to realize that ISIS has been conducting these horrific terrorist actions for years, not months. So I think a lot of people have come to almost get used to this bloody scenes.
Do you think that Daesh is an offshoot of Al-Qaeda? Because he mentioned Osama bin Laden in the video. Or it's a new group?
It was an offshoot at one point of time. Remember Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi?
Yes.
He was kind of leader of Al-Qaeda in the Levant. But you know, when like a baby is born and starts to grow, because of this region was a conflict region, and many parties started to pump money into ISIS, into Daesh at that time, because of political reasons. Some wanted to remove Bashar al-Assad,
Yes.
some were against this. So as this money and these resources poured into Daesh, the baby became bigger than the mother, which is Al-Qaeda. So at one point of time, it made no sense for the bigger entity, the bigger organization with higher resources to stay allegiant to Al-Qaeda. So although they share more or less the same ideology, but at one point of time, Daesh became much bigger, and then at that point, it changed its name from ISIS to IS, which is the so-called Islamic State, and started acting as if it were a state. We saw the Caliphate coming and and talking about his policies and things like that.
But Al-Qaeda was not committing these atrocities. Yeah, it wasn't like that. They adopted new ideology in dealing with hostages and foreigners. So
really,
how do you see this?
Al-Qaeda, in a way, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, where are the good old times of
terrorism,
of the moderate terrorists?" But in fact, Al-Qaeda itself also had many atrocities. We remember lashing and beheading of people in Afghanistan, and some of the hostages, and also the attacks on civilian targets, like in New York or in London or in Spain and other places, in Egypt, in Yemen. There were, in fact, I think Al-Qaeda laid the ground for ISIS, and then ISIS took it, I think, a step further. I think as they became more and more desperate, realizing that their goals are not being achieved, so they resorted to this sort of shock and awe, trying to shock the world with these savage actions to
Actually,
try to
I believe that it's unfair to relate such savage actions, as you term it, to terrorist groups like Daesh or Al-Qaeda, because such atrocities have been committed by Western countries throughout history. I mean, if we remember what France did in Algeria, if we remember what so many Western countries did in Africa, we found mass graves, we found what Spain did in Morocco. So there are so many atrocities. If we're talking about burning people alive and beheading and so on and so forth, history tells us more about that we cannot relate this to such terrorist groups. These actions have been carried out throughout history by Western countries, who are trying now to say that these actions are only committed by Muslim terrorists, by Islamist terrorists.
Well, I have no doubt that these groups came out as a reaction to all the atrocities you've been talking about. Remember, not so long ago, we don't have to go back to the Middle Ages or the Inquisition. Only as we speak, or in the last 10 years, almost, I think, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis have been slaughtered by the American invasion of Iraq on false pretenses, on wrong information, on wrong evidence, on allegations that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction were never found in Iraq, and millions were dislodged. The whole country fell apart. So the atrocities committed in one country, like Iraq, can be counted in hundreds of thousands. The same in Palestine. For the past 67 years now, for the past 67 years, Palestinians are forced to live under appalling conditions, without a home, without rights, being humiliated every day, being under siege all the time. So these atrocities, in fact, I argue that these atrocities, they laid this environment, so these terrorist organizations, they in fact came because they kind of disbelieved in the world justice system. International justice system has failed miserably, and I think the reason for these groups to emerge is this failure of the international justice system.
But actually, they are not taking revenge for Muslims. They are targeting Muslims themselves. They are not taking their operations to Israel. They are not targeting anyone but Muslim people.
I think that there are two theories, or more than two theories to explain that. One theory is which they announce or try to pretend that they believe in this theory, is that they say, okay, we have to first punish the regimes which made it possible for these Western countries or these Western powers to interfere or manipulate our lands and so on and so forth. And after we have dominion over this region, then we can turn to the external force. The other theory, of course, realizes that very often these groups were armed, financed by Western countries
to destabilize the whole region.
Exactly.
And this makes more sense.
Exactly. And we know at the end of the day, the manufacturers of arms are, you know, are outside of this region, whether it's east or the west. So it's not definitely, we don't manufacture arms. We can send. Just yesterday, I saw pictures of planes dropping, parachuting more arms and more ammunition to Daesh. So there are some parties which are
supporting terrorists.
Which are supporting. So if these parties are as alleged by some analysts, are Western powers, then it makes sense that these forces will only turn their anger against Arabs, against their fellow countrymen.
Sir, a news website called Al-Furat website said that former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton published a book in the United States in which she, I believe she named difficult options, and she talked about the formation of what is called Dawla al-Islamiyya, or the Islamic State, and Daesh. And she said, according to Al-Furat news website, that Hillary Clinton said that the United States went into the Iraqi war, the Libyan, the Syrian, everything was fine until the 30th of June revolution emerged in Egypt, and then everything changed and all the calculations changed. And she said that they had to do something about it and form what is called Daesh. How do you see this?
I think this is actually, this site is not accurate. This book, Hard Choices, does not have these codes, in fact. So this is a kind of a false, using false evidence.
Of the situation.
However, I think that we remember very well that the United States was supportive of the previous regime headed by the Muslim Brothers and Mohammed Morsi.
And this is very weird, by the way.
Yes, in a way, they, you know, the calculation was like this. The calculation was that the Muslim Brotherhood are the most organized, most well-funded organization, and it would be best to cooperate with such an organization. That's the kind of the advertised context. However, of course, we also know and realize that there has been cooperation between various Western powers and the Muslim Brotherhood since its inception, since the 40s. There was definitely very deep cooperation in Afghanistan. We remember very well some of the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood using, for example, syndicates of doctors in recruiting mujahideen, in having this Islamic Relief Fund, which was funneling funds to buy arms and sending, and also financing various Muslim Brotherhood economic, social and political activities. So there has always been some form of cooperation on the intelligence level, on the tactical level between various MI6, CIA and the Muslim Brotherhood. So it's the truth lies somewhere in the middle, but you know, I doubt very much that Hard Choices contained these quotations in this context. There may be some shifting of words, because at the end of the day, this is a smart lady. She was Secretary of State. Even if there were such plans, she's not, you know, foolish enough to print them in a book in this way.
Okay, Mr. Wael Nawara, political analyst, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
And this brings us to the end of today's edition of The Breakfast Show. Have a nice day.